Okay, good evening everyone, and Baruch Hashem, there's been a rain delay so we can have a shir tonight, Baruch Hashem. We're holding over here in Parshas Vayigash, coming to the very end almost of Sefer Bereshis, all the very dramatic scenes between Yosef and his brothers, the reunion of Yaakov Avinu and his son Yosef. I want to focus in on the end of the Parsha, where Yaakov meets Paro, and the exchange of words that take place over there, and very puzzling and very difficult to understand. The Torah is called Torah's Emes, the Torah of truth. And the reason that it's the Torah of truth is because it doesn't hide the truth from the world. Whatever is written inside the Torah is for eternity, for thousands and thousands of years. Any Jew anywhere in the world can open up a Chumash and they can see what it says about the Avos HaKadoshim, our great and holy forefathers. Any person in the world can open up a Chumash, can open up a Torah, can open up a Bible and see the words that are spoken in this week's Parsha. And they require a lot of understanding and thought and delving into, to try to understand why it is that Yaakov Avinu, the great and the holy Av of Klal Yisrael, who's known as the Bechir Shabavos, which means that he is the chosen, the most prizeworthy of all of our forefathers, how it is that some of the words that come out of his mouth and the message that is given is something that for all posterity Klal Yisrael is going to look at, and we're going to learn a lesson from the life of Yaakov Avinu. That, of course, what we should do, because most of his life is spoken about in a way that we should. But perhaps even in this week's Parsha, there's one area, one thing that Yaakov did that we have to learn. It's hard to even say the words because we never ever, Chalila, we can never criticize the Avos HaKadoshim, but there's one thing over here that Chazal seem to have a problem with in the way that Yaakov Avinu expresses himself and his feelings and aspects of his life. We're not big enough ever to criticize the Avos HaKadoshim. They're not human beings like we are. They're not living in Los Angeles in 2025 and going through the same meshugas that we go through on a daily basis. We're talking about Malachi Ashayis, we're talking about angels of Hashem. And they lived on a level, that a madrega that was far beyond and above anything that humankind and mankind could fathom. And we have to be very careful as we tread onto the message that we're going to speak about tonight, and we're going to look through it in the words of Chazal and try to understand what is going on over here. Yaakov Avinu meets Paro. So now it's the end of the 7 years of plenty. The years of famine have begun already in Mitzrayim. Yaakov Avinu comes in, and the moment that he comes in, the Nile River comes rising up, the water starts overflowing once again. Famine is over. Yaakov Avinu brings bracha into the land, and everything begins to go back to its place, and Paro is forever grateful to Yaakov Avinu. Now, Paro sees Yaakov standing in front of him. Vayomer Paro Yaakov, and Paro says to Yaakov, Kama yemei shenei chayecha. How many are the days of the year of your life? Meaning, how old are you? Now, when I was a child, we were always taught that you never ask an older person how old they are. It's probably the rudest thing you can ask of another person. Well, how old are you? So little kids, fine, they're little children, they look at a person, they're older, they may have gray hair, they're a little wrinkly, so wow, how old are you? But when you're an adult, you never go to another person and see them and say, whoa, how old are you? You never say such a thing. So Paro is breaking all the laws of etiquette over here. And the first question, they're meeting each other. And the first question that he's asking Yaakov Avinu is, Kama, I mean, he does it in such a nice poetic way, Kama yemei shnei chayecha, how many are the days and the years of your life? How old are you, old man? Vayomer Yaakov Paro. Yaakov is not thrown off by the question, and he answers immediately. Yemei shnei migurai shloishim u'ma'a shana. The days in the years of my dwelling are 30 years, u'ma'a shana, and they are 100 years. Ma'at v'royim hayu, few and bad were they. Yemei shnei chayai, the days in the years of my life. V'lo hisigu es yemei shnei chayei avoisai b'yemei mugureim. I did not reach the years of life that my ancestors, my forefathers, Avram and Yitzchak, were able to reach in their days of dwelling. Yaakov Avinu answers the question. In fact, I am an old man. That's probably why you're looking at me like that. I'm 130 years old, says Yaakov Avinu. And the days of my life, ma'at v'royim, few and bad. Now this is a very troubling statement for Yaakov Avinu to make for all time in the Chumash, in the Torah. Yaakov Avinu sounds like, certainly on the surface, that he is complaining about the days of his life. The days of my life are ma'at, they were few, v'royim, and they were bad. Meaning, you could answer very nicely compared to Avram and Yitzchak, who lived 175 years, 180 years. So I'm relatively young. I'm only 130. What can I do? I have the Erichas Yamim, the long life that they had. But then he adds the word v'royim, and they were bad. They were raw. Ra means bad, means terrible, bitter years. What is Yaakov Avinu saying over here? He's answering Paro. They're meeting each other for the first time, and he's answering over here in such a way that makes it sound like he's very unsatisfied and disappointed, and he had a hard life, and he's sharing that with Paro. There's a very famous piece in the Sichas Musar, which is Rav Chaim Shmulevitz. He was one of the great Rosh Yeshivas of the Mir before the war and after the war, when they escaped through Shanghai, the miraculous salvations that they went through. He eventually ended up in Eretz Yisrael, and he was Rosh Yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael. And he was famous for his Musar Shmuzim, his drushes that he gave. He was a very massive Talmud Chacham with a very deep, penetrating understanding of the Torah and Chazal, and also man himself, Midas, composition, spirituality, neshama. And he was also a very emotionally in tune person. And many of the writings that Rav Chaim Shmulevitz has, they're just eye-opening ideas of what a human being, what a Jew, what an Eved Hashem is really all about. And he is bothered by these words, but he's not the one that's bothered. Chazal are the ones, as we're going to see, are bothered by the words of Yaakov Avinu. And he starts off by quoting a pasuk in Eicha. Eicha is the book of Lamentations that we read on Tisha B'Av. And the verse says, Ma yis'aynin adam chai gever. Of what shall a living man complain? Al Chatov, on his sins. He should complain about his sins. Rashi explains, this verse is quoted in the Gemara, in Kiddushin, and Rashi explains, Lama Yisrael Adam ala Korois Habois Alav. Why does a person complain about all of the situations that arise in his life and the different things that come upon him? Acher kol ha'chesed shani oisa imai. After all of the kindness, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that I did with this person, I've given him life. Says Rashi on this verse over here, why is a person who's alive complaining? I gave him the gift of life, and he complains? Is there anything greater than happened to each and every one of us that is here than when you woke up this morning and you realized, I'm alive? You went through an entire day. I was driving home today from the city to the valley, and I usually take Coanga to get onto the 101, and as I'm pulling up, I see it's marked off. There's police tape and there's police car. It's closed. And I look past the police tape and I see, why is it closed? Because so much rain, the whole area where you get onto the freeway flooded, and there was a car submerged in the water. I don't know what happened to the person who was in that car. Submerged in the water. So we all made it through the freeway. We made it through the rain today. We didn't wash away. We're here. So Ma Yisrael, what does a person that's alive, what do they have to complain about? They have the greatest gift in the world. It's called life itself. And he quotes over here of Leib Chasman, who was the Mashgiach of Hebron, who says the following idea, a mashal, a parable. He says, imagine a person wins the lottery. And he was just told that a Powerball is $1.7 billion right now, something like that. Imagine the guy finds out he's the winner of the Powerball lottery. He just won $1.7 billion. And while he's being told the good news that he just became a billionaire, $1.7 billion to his name, he finds out that he has a beautiful vase that's sitting in his kitchen. One of his kids came and knocked it off the counter, and the whole thing just came shattering all over the floor. Do you think that this person who just made $1.7 billion cares about a vase that's shattered on the floor? He laughs to himself and he says, I can buy 1 million of those right now. I'm a billionaire. Says Rav Leib Chasman, a person is given the greatest gift in the world. It's called life. Will there be things that are shattering in life? Yes. Will there be things that break in life? Yes. Will there be disappointments in life? Yes. Will there be things that are hard to understand? Yes. That's the way that life is going to work. But is that a reason for a person to be Yisroim, to start complaining to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? You're given the greatest gift in the world. You're a billionaire. You have life. The Ribbono Shel Olam, Master of the universe, has chosen you. And He's given you life. He's given you health. He's given you abilities. You can see, you can talk, you can hear. What you can do. Okay, so not everything is going to work out. And there's going to be a little pain and suffering along the way. And things don't always go our way what we would like it to be. All true. But if you have $1 billion, so then if a vase shatters in the kitchen, you laugh it off and you say, you know what? I have so much more. Says Rav Leib Chasman, the way of a Jew in this world is, if you keep in the forefront of your mind always, Baruch Hashem HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm alive. Baruch Hashem HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you've given me another day of life. Thank you, Hashem. I can walk, I can talk, I can see, I can hear, I can do all of these things. Thank you, Hashem. So then all of the little details of life that we're going to go through, the mishaps and the ups and the downs and the disappointments and the upsetting things, all of that will be like the shattering of the vase. If I'm a billionaire who just won Powerball Lotto, so I don't care so much about that. That'll just be, we'll just sweep it away and we'll get ourselves something new and something better. Says Chaim Shmulevitz, the way of Klal Yisrael and the way of the Jewish people is that they're able to recognize that the most valuable thing in life is life itself. He quotes a verse in Tehillim. Dovid HaMelech, King David says, Yasur Yasrani Ka, Ulamaves Lo Nesanani. You have afflicted me, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but you never put me into the hands of death. Even though that Hashem has afflicted me with great punishments. But I did not fall into the hands of death. I'm alive. I don't even feel the suffering that I'm going through. King David, as we know, nobody suffered in the world more than Dovid HaMelech. As a matter of fact, Chazal tell us that the reason that any Jew anywhere in the world can open up a Sefer Tehillim, and they can read anywhere in the Sefer Tehillim, and sometimes they start feeling the emotion, they start getting the goosebumps, they feel that these words of Tehillim are speaking directly to me, is because Dovid HaMelech, in his life of suffering, he suffered every ounce of suffering that every Jew in the history of Klal Yisrael would ever go through in their own life. Which means that his suffering is your suffering. Or we should say, your suffering is his suffering. He feels it all intrinsically inside. And therefore, he himself is saying, but the greatest gift of all is the gift of life. And as long as I'm alive, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I don't even feel the Yisurim, the pain that I am going through. There's a fascinating story of a yeshiva bacher in Eretz Yisrael. He was a young man, it sounds like from the story, probably in his early 20s. One day his leg was hurting him. He didn't think much of it. The next day, again and again and again, he comes home that week for Shabbos and he tells his parents, I'm not feeling so well. Something with my leg, it's really hurting me. They take him to the doctor. The doctor begins examining his leg. He feels here, he feels there. Doesn't like so much what he sees. He begins running a battery of tests, and the next thing you know, they find out, Rachmana litzlan lo aleinu, this young man has cancer that is eaten up inside of that particular leg. And the doctor begins coming up with his diagnosis and the prognosis and what he decides if should be done. And he says, if we want to save you, we have to amputate your leg. And the young man, 20 years old, the whole life in front of him, he doesn't know what to do, amputate a leg. There's no other treatments. And the doctor says, there are other treatments. But nothing is a guarantee that it's going to work. And the cancer is very aggressive. It can start eating at other parts of your body. If you want to save your life, let's get rid of your leg and save the rest of you. When the doctor tells them, but you know what, here in Israel, this is not the place to do the surgery. There is a hospital, a clinic in Minneapolis called the Mayo Clinic. He says, over there they have the expert in this field. He's a doctor par excellence. He is the master of amputations. That's where you're going to have to go and have the surgery done. And so the boy consults with his Rebbeim. The parents consult with their Rabbanim. And the decision is made, we're going to take this young man, fly him off to America, and have the procedure done in the Mayo Clinic. And he comes there with emunah. He comes there with bitachon, with trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, faith in Hashem. If this is what the Rebbeinu Shalom wants from him, and this is how he's going to live a long life, then that is what he will do. And he comes, and he meets the doctor. The doctor happens to be a Jew, not religious, but he's a Jew. And he sees this young boy, 20 years old, he's going to amputate his leg. He begins explaining the process and what's going to happen. And the boy says, doctor, it's okay. I'm not nervous. You do whatever you need to do. Let's save my life. I'd rather live than have the cancer eat my body up. And the doctor tells him, okay, listen, you're going to go to sleep. And when you wake up, you're not going to have a leg anymore. It's going to be very shocking to you. And probably when you wake up, the first thing you do is going to start reaching for your leg, and you're going to realize that it's not there. It might be very scary. You're going to have what's called phantom pains, which means you'll feel pain as if you have a leg, but you don't have a leg. And I'm just warning you, it's emotionally distressful for a person when it first happens. Our nurses will be there, the doctors will be there, we'll send you the psychiatrist, the psychologist, if we need, we'll help you through. And the boy says, doctor, please don't worry about me. You do what you need to do, I'll do what I need to do. Let's just do the surgery. And sure enough, the boy goes into the operating room with the words of Tehillim on his lips. And the doctor does a long and painful surgery, and he amputates the young man's leg. They wheel him back to the recovery room, and there's a nurse that is assigned to the room to make sure that this boy is okay, that his vitals are in place, in case when he wakes up and he gets frightened, someone is there to calm him down. And the nurse is watching, And she sees, Baruch Hashem, the vitals are good, his heart rate is good, his oxygen is good. She notices that the boy begins to stir. And he begins to awaken. And as he awakens, sure enough, exactly as the doctor says, he begins to take his hands and he starts feeling towards his leg, only to realize there is no leg there anymore. And the boy goes back to sleep. And about 20 minutes later, so the boy begins stirring once again. And he starts moving his hands around his leg. And as he is, his lips begin moving. He's saying something. And the nurse doesn't know. Maybe the boy is going out of his mind at this point. She calls the doctor and immediately, doctor, the boy's waking up. He's saying something. He's feeling his leg. He's saying something. And the doctor, a Jew, comes running into this yeshiva boy's room. And he sees the boy is moving his lips. But instead of looking like he's in distress, the boy is smiling. And the doctor walks over to the boy. And although that he doesn't know so much, he understands that the boy is saying some kind of a bracha, some kind of a blessing. And then the boy opens his eyes. And he sees the doctor standing over him. And the doctor says, "Excuse me, young man, are you saying a blessing?" And the boy says, "Yes, I am." He says, "You're saying a blessing to God? That your leg was just amputated?" He said, "Yes, I am." And the doctor says, "I don't know so much, but I'm almost certain there's not a blessing on an amputated leg. What were you saying?" And he said, "Doctor, you have no idea how happy I am that you did the surgery and you were successful today. Because of this surgery, the cancer is gone and clean from my body, and I, God willing, am going to live for a long time, healthy and strong. I'm going to get married, I'm going to have children, I'm going to have a family, I'm going to contribute to Klal Yisrael. And it's because of this surgery over here. So you know what bracha I made? I made the blessing, HaToiv v'HaMeitiv. Hashem is good, and He does good. Everything that Hashem does is good, and He now has done good today. He removed my leg, so I will be able to live a long and a happy life." The doctor was overwhelmed with the emunah and the bitachon of this young man. A man that's going through suffering. A young man that's going through debilitating surgeries. A young man that's going to walk out of that hospital with only one leg when he walked in with two. And he's thanking Hashem because everything that Hashem does is good and He will continue to do good. That is the life of a Jew. And that's what Dovid HaMelech is saying. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's true, you made me suffer. You put me through a lot. Things have not been easy. But you know what? Ulamaves loina sanani. You didn't put me into the hands of death. Therefore, chai ani, I'm alive. Therefore, ar lo yargish, I don't feel the suffering at all. That's the level. That's the highest level that a person can be on, where even when they're going through the suffering of life, but I'm alive, I don't even feel it. Says Reb Chaim Shmulevitz, if that's the case, Dovid HaMelech came many, many years after Yaakov Avinu. And this story about our young man in Bnei Brak, in Minneapolis, that's happening thousands of years after Yaakov Avinu. So how is it possible that Yaakov Avinu is standing before Paro, and Paro says, "Wow, you look so old. How old are you?" And he says, "I'm not as old as my forefathers." And the reason is because a few and miserable days have I had in my life. Yaakov Avinu is complaining about his life. Says of Chaim Shmulevitz, Chazal tell us in the Midrash the following words. The Midrash says, B'shah she'amar Yaakov Avinu leParoi, at the moment that Yaakov Avinu said to Paro, Ma'at v'roim ha'yimei shnei chayai, that few and bad were the days of my life. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem said to Yaakov the following, Ani melatasicho me'esav u'milavan, I saved you, I rescued you from your brother Esav. You imagine what Yaakov Avinu went through in his life. He had a brother named Esav that was chasing him from the womb. I saved you from him. I saved you from your father-in-law Lavan, the most wicked man of the generation, who tricked you 1,000 times in those 20 years. I rescued you from him. You had a daughter whose name was Dinah. She was abducted by Shem, and yet I gave her back to you in one piece. And then your son Yosef, who you just lived the last 22 years without, you didn't know, is he dead or is he alive? You were unsure. I gave you a reunion that nobody in history will ever forget. I've given you everything, Yaakov Avinu. It's true that you went through difficulties and hardships and struggles. It's true. And it was painful. It's true. But I rescued you from everything, and I gave you back everything that you felt that you lost. And you're complaining about your life, that it was short and it was bad. Yaakov, really? Chayecha, says the Midrash, I swear to you, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, from the amount of words that are in these psukim, from when it says that that Paro asked Yaakov, how old are you? Until b'yemei magurai, to the end of your comments, you're going to be, I'll take away all those years of your life. Mida keneged mida, measure for measure. Every word that was uttered in this exchange between Paro and Yaakov Avinu, every word equals a year, and every one of those years I'm taking away from your life. Your forefathers lived to 175, 180. You could have lived much longer, but I'm going to take away the years of your life. And so, therefore, says the Gemara, that what was that? Lamed Gimel Tevos, there are 33 words in these verses, and therefore 33 years of the life of Yaakov that could have been to him, taken away from him, because he complained. Now, again, these are not our words, this is the Midrash. This is Chazal. Chazal are deep in the story. They're deep in the mind of a Yaakov Avinu. They are far beyond the scenes, more than what we can see and we can understand. We would never have any right to say a word against Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov went through Esav, he went through Lavan, he lost his daughter Dinah, he gets her back. He loses Yosef, 22 years. He's living in shambles for 22 years, he gets him back. He had a hard life, he had to work double for his wives. He had 4 wives, 12 sons. He went through everything. If Yaakov Avinu in our mind would say, it wasn't such an easy life, we would say, we got it, Yaakov, you're right. We understand. You had a really hard life. 100 years of hardships. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, no. Yaakov Avinu, the chosen one of the Avos HaKadoshim, the forefather of Klal Yisrael, is complaining. Even though it's small what he complains, he's not cursing his life. He's not complaining to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He's just saying, it's the days of my life were few and they were bad. So says the Midrash, he loses 33 years off of his life. However, says Chaim Shmulevitz, the problem with this is that the words that were spoken from Yaakov to Paro are not 33 words. It's less than that. But the verse, the Midrash is including Vayomer Yaakov Paroi, that Yaakov said to Paro, that Vayomer Paro Yaakov, that Paro said to Yaakov, Kama Yemesh Chayecha, how old are you? The question of Paro is part of the 33 words. That's not Yaakov Avinu complaining. Yaakov, you want to punish Yaakov Avinu, then he's going to lose years off of his life because he complained. So take his words at face value. Yaakov said, the days of the years of my life were few and they were bad. Okay, so we'll take those words, each word is equal to 1 year, we'll take those years out of your life. But why is he getting punished for the statement, the question that Paro asked, Yaakov, how old are you? And he explains, based on the many Bali Taisus, the Ramban, many of the Mefarshim over here, Yaakov Avinu looked like the most ancient, oldest man in the entire universe. Now, he was only 130 years old, only, compared to his father Yitzchak, who was 180, compared to his grandfather Avram, who was 175, he was a young man. And he looked ancient, like he walked out of some antiquities, place of antiquities. His beard was white as you could imagine. The wrinkles were deeply sunken into his face. He looked like the oldest man in the history of the world. And that caused Paro to ask the question, Yaakov Avinu, how old are you? I've never in my life seen someone as ancient and decrepit and wrinkled and white as you are. Why do you look like that? Says Rav Chaim Shmulevitz, the Midrash is telling us that since that Yaakov Avinu went through his life of Yisurim, of suffering, and apparently it affected him in a very, very hard way, to the extent that he looked surprisingly ancient in the eyes of Paro. So that means that itself was part of the punishment that Yaakov is going to receive, because he allowed all of the suffering in his life to make him into this ancient old man. Which means that the Torah would expect of a Yaakov Avinu that even though that he had the hardest life of all of the forefathers, he went through much, much more suffering than anybody else. But on his level, who he is, what his life is all about, the man of truth who sits in the tents of study, who believes strongly in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and sees that he has a life of suffering, he knows that that's all part of what his life is going to be. If he would have accepted it the way that Dovid HaMelech, King David, accepts it, and like we said in the words of King David, Chai ani amalai v'al kain lo argish b'yisur, I don't even feel the suffering, then Yaakov Avinu, it's true he would have gotten gray, and he would have gotten old, everybody gets old, and he would have had wrinkles, and he would have had all that, he would have been maybe a little hunched over, and maybe would have been a little shorter than he was when he was a young man of 60, it's true. But he would not have had the face of the most ancient man in the history of the world, who had gone through a lifetime of Yisurim, and each and every single one affected him in a way that made him look the way that he looked. And therefore says the Midrash, again, this is not us, and this is not a modern day commentary on the traumatic life of Jacob, which is what they love to say to Joseph had such a traumatic life. Yosef did not have a traumatic life. Yosef at Tzaddik lived in a dungeon for 12 years. He's whisked out and he's standing in front of Paro as if nothing happened. And he's talking to him mano imano, one-on-one, and he's telling him, you have to do this and do this and do this and do this. And Hashem is the one that's running the world anyway. Yosef had no trauma. He was a man of deep levels of emunah, bitachin in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It was all in place. Yaakov Avinu, no trauma. Hard life, yes. Traumatic, no. Did he have to go to the psychiatrist and get some pills to make him happy? No, not at all. This is Yaakov Avinu. The Bechir Shababa is the greatest of all the forefathers. But he had a hard life. No one's going to deny that. The Torah doesn't deny that. The Midrash doesn't deny that. Nobody does. And Yaakov knew that. He went through anguish, emotional anguish and pain every step of the way. But Yaakov, says the Midrash, HaKadosh Baruch Hu expected that you'd handle it a little bit better. And that instead of letting the Yisurim be crushing and breaking and hurtful and so painful, you would have been like a Dovid HaMelech, and you would have said, you know what, I went through the suffering, but I'm alive. Chayani, I'm alive. I don't even feel the suffering that is there. And for that he gets punished. 33 years of his life taken away. He could have been 180, but he wasn't because of this over here. I would just like to be Melamed Schus to find a way to judge Yaakov Avinu favorably under the circumstances, because it's very painful to say things about Yaakov Avinu and point out some chisar and some lacking that there seem to be. But perhaps the limud schus, which means the benefit of the doubt that we can give to a Yaakov Avinu, is that nobody could understand, and Rav Chaim Shalev himself writes that nobody could be masig, nobody could understand what the enormity of the nisyonos, of the challenges and the suffering was that Yaakov Avinu had to endure in his life. Nobody can know what it means to have a brother whose name is Esav and be running from him all of your life. Nobody can know what it means to have a father-in-law by the name of Lavan who tricks you like a dirty scoundrel every single day for 22 years while you are living in his house, driving you crazy, to the point crazy beyond belief. Nobody knows what it's like to have one wife and he tricks you with a second wife, and then have 4 wives and 12 children. Imagine all the diapers, imagine all the formula, imagine all the food, imagine all the everything, imagine all the emotions, imagine everything going on over there. Nobody can know what it means to have your precious only daughter abducted by Shechem ben Hamor, who defiles her and takes her away. And the pain and the anguish of a Yiddish father knowing where his daughter was taken in the hands of a non-Jewish man. Baruch Hashem, to eventually get her back, but that suffering, that anguish, that pain. And then, of course, the anguish of not knowing what happens to Yosef. Yaakov Avinu is never consoled for 22 years, which Chazal say means Yaakov did not fully believe that Yosef was dead. Because when somebody dies, so you can be consoled, there's a week of Shiva, there's Shloshim, there's 30 days, there's the whole year of Avelos, of mourning, and when the year is over, full consolation. 22 years, Yaakov Avinu never was consoled. Why not? He wasn't sure. Is Yosef really dead? Or maybe he was taken, kidnapped, maybe he's abducted, maybe he's somewhere else in this world. Maybe I'll find him, I don't know. So for 22 years he was living without the Shekhinah, he was in a state of depression, he was down. His whole life, one day, 1 year after the other, was all suffering. Nobody could be masig, nobody could imagine the enormity of the challenges that Yaakov Avinu went through. But he went through each and every one of them with his amun intact in Hashem. And it's only natural that a person had to work so hard to overcome the challenges of life. Of course he's going to go gray. Of course he's going to look old. Of course it's going to be hard. Of course it's going to be difficult. And there's Chazal are not faulting him for the fact that it took a lot of energy to go through all of those Yisurim. Of course. And on that, Yaakov Avinu was like everybody else. You go through one klap, one punch, one patch after the other from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's going to hurt. And it's going to be difficult. And it's going to be a lot. And you're going to get old. And you're going to get gray. And you're going to get wrinkles. And your body might ache. It's true. But Chazal are telling us that for Yaakov Avinu, as much as he went through, as painful as it was, as hard as it was, Yaakov still at the end of his days could have said something else to Paro. How old are you? I'm not as old as my forefathers. I'm relatively young, 130 years old. But he understood that Paro was asking, why do you look so old? I've never seen anyone as old as you. And he had to admit, because he's a man of truth, he had to admit, I had a hard life. It wasn't easy. Says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Yaakov, you can't complain about a hard life because you're alive. And you have Yosef, and you have Dinah, and I saved you from Esav, and I saved you from Lavan. And you got the brachas, and your children are going to be Klal Yisrael, and we're going to be called B'nai Yisrael, B'nai Yaakov, for all of eternity. Yaakov Avinu, that's not the answer to give. The Dan L'chav Schus, the judging favorably is, yes, he went through everything, he was accepted everything, he did his best in every situation, and he rose to the top. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying through the words of Chazal over here, Yaakov could have said it in a different way. And on his level, again, if we would complain at the end of a lifetime, it was a hard life. Can I tell you? It was hard. I went through a lot of difficulties, a lot of challenges, a lot of pain. Baruch Hashem, it's all good. We had nothing, no punishments. We would get no punishments. But Yaakov, on his madrega, on his level, HaKadosh Baruch Hu expected more from him. And that means that if that's the great Yaakov Avinu, and Yaakov Avinu is supposed to not complain because he has the gift of life, then that means that the truth is every single person examines their own lives and their own challenges and their own struggles with HaKadosh Baruch Hu puts us through. And he puts everybody through something, or some things, in plural. A person is supposed to go through it and say, but Baruch Hashem, Ani Chai, I'm alive. And as long as I woke up this morning and I'm alive and I could drive through the streets and there was safe and sound in the sleek streets of Los Angeles with all the rain, and as long as I can come here tonight and I can learn and I can hear and I can see all these things, and I can have hands that work, and I put my hands in my pockets and pull out the keys and get in my car and drive home, and I have a place to go to and there's food on the table, all those things, Baruch Hashem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you've given me so much. You gave me life, a life that is worth living, a life that is worth leading, and therefore sometimes the vase shatters on the ground. Yeah, but I just won lotto, $1.7 billion. That vase is not worth anything. I don't even feel 1 ounce of distress or pain or loss over the vase because I've got so much more in my hand. Says Rav Leib Chasman, when a person sees the gift of life, the bracha, the blessing of life, when things are shattering in their life, when things are not going the way that they want to, I don't even really feel it because I have so much more. I'm a billionaire of life. I want to leave you off with one final story over here. A beautiful ma'isa of a chashav yid in Eretz Yisrael by the name of Ezra Barzel. He's a classic Yerushalmi. I don't know if anybody knows what a Yerushalmi looks like in the streets of Mei Sharim and Geula. Next time you go to Eretz Yisrael, you ask somebody, what is Yerushalmi? He'll point to you. It's a erlich yid, beautiful smile, pay is down to here, a nice hat and a beard, and goes along simply with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Reb Barzel was such a person. But at the end of his life, he was suffering tremendously from Yisurim, from all of the different pains and the aches and his body shutting down and the like. One day, a friend of his by the name of Reuven Karelenstein came to visit him. And he sat down next to his friend Rav Ezra, and he wanted to have a conversation with him. Now Rav Ezra's son was also sitting there, but at this point Rav Ezra, much of his body had shut down. His vitals were beginning to shut down, but even worse than that perhaps was, he could no longer even speak, and he couldn't hear so well either. And so this Rav Karelenstein is sitting down next to him, he's trying to talk to him, and every time that Rav Ezra tries to express himself, the words are coming out slurred, and nobody can understand. And as much as Rav Reuven Karelenstein is trying to understand him, he says, you mean like this, like this? No, nothing. So with a little bit of his strength that is left, this Rav Ezra leans over to the nightstand next to his bed and he pulls out a siddur and he opens up to Hallel, which we just said these words for 8 days on Hanukkah. There is one of the paragraphs, you don't say it all of the time. On Rosh Chodesh you don't say this. On the last 7 days of Pesach you don't say this, but on the 8 days of Hanukkah we said this paragraph. Loi lanu. Loi lanu Hashem, loi lanu, not for our sake Hashem, ki l'shimcha tein kavod l'chasdecha, to give honor to your chesed. And then it says in the verses the following, Atzabeihem kesev v'zahav. Their atzabeihem, their idols, are made out of kesev, out of silver and gold. Maisi de'adam, they are the handiwork of man. Pelehem v'lo yidabeiru, they have a mouth, but they can't speak. So Rav Ezra is pointing at the words in Hallel. They have a mouth and they can't speak. And then he goes, I have a mouth, I can't speak. Pelehem einayim v'lo yiru. They have eyes, but they can't see. Oznayim v'lo yishma. They have ears and they can't hear. Can't hear. He's pointing to his own ears, he can't hear. Aflehem v'lo yirichu. They have a nose, they can't smell. He's pointing to his nose, he can barely smell. Yedeyim v'lo yimishu. They have hands, they can't use them. I can't barely do anything with my hands. Ragleim v'lo yalechu. My legs, I can't go anywhere. He's pointing to his legs, I can't. So he's looking at the words and he's pointing to his legs. V'lo yegu b'groinom. And they have nothing, they can't even utter a sound from their throat. So he has nothing. And he's looking at the words in the Tehillim, in the Hallel, and he's pointing to every part of his body. It doesn't work, just like it says about these idols over here. And then it says, Kamayim yu oiseyim, like them should be their makers, meaning that the makers of all these foreign gods, they should be nothing as well. So he's looking at his friend, Rav Karelnstein, and he's looking at himself, and he's looking at the words in Hallel, and he's asking the question, the unspoken question, what is different about me and these foreign gods, these idols? They can't talk, I can't talk. They can't hear, I can't hear. They can't use their hands, I can't use my hands. They can't run, I can't run. What is the difference between me and them? And at this point, with as much excitement as he can muster up, he begins pointing to the next 4 words in the next 3 words over here in the Hallel. Yisrael betach b'Hashem. Yisrael, the Jewish people, they trust in Hashem. And he keeps pointing again and again and again. Yisrael betach b'Hashem. Klal Yisrael, the Jewish people, they trust in Hashem. And he was telling his son and his friend the following words. Maybe my mouth doesn't work. Maybe I cannot hear. Maybe my hands, my feet don't go anyplace. I can't do anything. I'm no better than these idols. But I have one mila, I have one thing that makes me eternal over everything else. And that is that in all of the suffering, and all of the pain, and all the beating up that I've taken, Yisrael betach b'Hashem, a Jew trusts and relies in Hashem. And that can never be taken away from a Jew. Hashem can take away their hands. They can take away their eyes. Can take away the ears. Take away the nose, they can't smell. But the bitachin, the trust in Hashem, the belief in Hashem, that is something that it can never be taken away from the Jew. And that's what we're saying here tonight. That when a Jew is a maimin, they believe in Hashem, and they're boteach in Hashem, they trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and they live their life like that, they recognize what's the most valuable thing in life? You have the $1.7 billion neshama. You have life itself. It's worth more than anything in this world, because when you're alive, you can accomplish more and more and more. And maybe, just maybe, the struggles and the yisurim and the suffering and the difficulties that a person is going to go through, maybe that itself is what's going to make your life even more magnificent in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And therefore, if we appreciate the gift of life, and we embrace the life that Hashem has given to us, and we don't yisrael, and we don't complain about that which Hashem has done or that He hasn't done for us, and we come to HaKadosh Baruch and we say, Yisrael betach b'Hashem klal Yisrael, me, I'm a member of klal Yisrael, I trust in Hashem, then whatever we don't have is irrelevant. Because if we have bitachon, if we have trust in Hashem, we have everything. And that's the way that Dovid lived his life. He had so many yisurim, so much suffering, but he said, I don't feel a thing, because all I feel is the gift of life. May we be zeichem yetz Hashem, that Hashem doesn't have to bring yisurim and suffering. He doesn't have to bring difficulties and hardships upon a person, that we shall Kodesh Baruch Hu, we appreciate and we love the life that He has given us the way that it is. And even if there are these struggles that a person, because everybody has to go through in life, but we don't let it make us into ancient, antiquated people. Rather, it's just mechazik us in our appreciation of Hashem, of life, of HaToiv, HaMeitiv. He is good and He will continue to do good. And Bez Hashem, and that's zechus, as Yaakov Avinu and his family end up becoming the pioneers of Mitzrayim. And from the beginnings of Egypt comes the ultimate geula, the redemption of Klal Yisrael. If we recognize all of the gullus, all of the exile that we go through personally in our lives, and we use it in the right way to appreciate the life that Hashem has given us, that'll bring us into the ultimate geula, a geula hanefesh, a geula for ourselves, a geula for our families, and the ultimate geula for Klal Yisrael, who recognizes that the gift that Hashem wants to give to everyone is Yisrael betach b'Hashem. Trust in Hashem, live life accordingly, and be'ez Hashem Yisbarach, we should be zeicha to find favor in the eyes of Hashem in everything that we do.